Y10s. Welcome to Year 10 Biology, and welcome to Doing Science Right. All the PowerPoints that we cover in class are going to be uploaded to Doing Science Right, so that if you're away from class, you can keep up with the content we're doing. If you'd like to take notes outside of class or before class begins to help give you a bit of a step up in the classroom, you can do that as well. This is a very short PowerPoint for the first week. It's not very strenuous, only about 5 or 7 or 8 minutes probably. So let's begin. We're going to start by talking, so it's general biology we're looking at in this first week, and cells and cell organelles is the general biology we're looking at. So we're going to start by talking about cellular life. We know from studying organisms that all organisms are built up from cells, and that all organisms can be divided into 2 different categories. The first being unicellular organisms, cells that are made up of only one cell, unicellular, one cell, and multicellular, many cells, so organisms that are made up of more than one cell. And we're going to look at both of those types of organisms in this PowerPoint. We're going to start by talking about multicellular organisms. Now, multicellular organisms, because they're so complex and they have many cells, they organize their hierarchy, or their cells, into different categories. So their cells group into tissues, those tissues group into organs, and their organs group into systems. This allows the multicellular organism to provide specialized functions which are necessary for their survival. We start with cells. Cells are the very basic structural and functional units of all organisms, like we said before. And a group of similar cells will group themselves together to form tissue, and that tissue will perform a specific function. Organs, on the other hand, organs are a group of different tissues, or different types of tissues, that are going to work together to perform a specific function. We can then grab all our organs together, or some organs together, multiple organs, to create a system. And the system will perform a specific role in the organism. We will look at the different types of cells, but we're going to start off with prokaryotic cells, which are a type of unicellular organism. It's probably beneficial if you are to draw and label the prokaryotic cell, like I've done on the right-hand side here. It's a really useful diagram, and it's very possible you'll be required to draw it in a test. So there's 2 types of cells, like I mentioned before. There's eukaryotic cells and prokaryotic cells. Prokaryotic cells are unicellular organisms. They don't have a nucleus, and they don't have internal compartments. They don't have organelles. Prokaryotics were the first organisms to evolve on Earth, and they have the simplest structure that we know of. They're very small in size. They're found virtually everywhere. There's probably even some on your hands or arms or desk right now. Like all cells, they have a cell membrane, but prokaryotic cells also have a cell wall. It's thicker and it's stronger than a membrane because multicellular organisms generally have skeletons, internal or external. Prokaryotic cells don't have that, so they have the cell wall to help protect them from their environment. It gives them structure, and it prevents the cell from bursting. The inside of the cell is entirely filled with cytoplasm. Now, in prokaryotic cells, because there's no organelles, part of the cytoplasm will appear slightly lighter when we look through electron micrographs. That's because that's the section that contains DNA in the cell, and the DNA in prokaryotic cells is going to be circular, whereas in eukaryotic cells it's going to be linear. So that's prokaryotic cells. So now looking at eukaryotic cells, they're a much more complicated internal structure than prokaryotic cells because they've got those specialized compartments. Each section is separated by a single or double membrane, and that creates what we know as organelles. Just as organs are specialized, so are organelles, and they perform a particular role in those cells. They're split into 2 types, eukaryotic cells, plant and animal cells, and we're going to have to draw both, unfortunately. There will be some labeled diagrams here. So if we move down to animal cells, here's an animal cell. You've got your rough endoplasmic reticulum, your lysosome, your ribosomes, your Golgi Body, mitochondria, cell membrane, cytoplasm, smooth endoplasmic reticulum, nucleus, and the nucleolus. I'd strongly recommend that you pause the PowerPoint at this point and you draw this because, again, it's going to turn up in tests that you have to draw animal cells. All these organelles in this PowerPoint, we're going to talk about what they actually do inside the cell and how they help eukaryotic cells. Additionally to animal cells, we also have plant cells. And you'll notice that there's almost all of these organelles are exactly the same, except we also have a cell wall, like we had in prokaryotic cells. Again, because plants don't have that skeleton to help provide that structure, so they have the cell wall to provide that structure. Other organelles that are slightly different are chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are only found in plant cells. And we also have a vacuole, which helps provide that little bit of structure in plant cells as well. We're now going to, again, I would recommend that you pause the video here and draw the plant cell because you will be required to draw these in tests. We're going to look at each of the organelles in more detail now. So we'll start with the mitochondria. The first thing I want to focus on is this little statement at the bottom here. You've been taught in Year 7, 8, 9 that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Now that you're entering senior biology, don't ever call the mitochondria the powerhouse of the cell because it's not a good scientific term. Instead, you'll say that the mitochondria, which is found in both animal and plant cells, is the site of aerobic respiration, and that's how the cells use oxygen and sugar to create energy. You can see the mitochondria here, and you would have labelled it on both your plant and animal cells before. Moving on, we have the Golgi Body. The Golgi Body you can find right here, and again you would have labelled this in your plant and animal cell diagrams before. It's a group of membrane-bound vesicles that's responsible for packaging compounds that can use in and outside of the cell. So very simple for the Golgi Body. Ribosomes, on the other hand, again, you would have labelled these in both plant and animal cells. They're also found in prokaryotic cells, so they're not really, well, they're organelles, but they're not membrane-bound organelles. So they break the rule that we can find ribosomes in prokaryotic cells. Ribosomes are made of RNA, and the purpose of a ribosome is to create proteins from the genetic code, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in future weeks. Moving on to the endoplasmic reticulum, we have two types of endoplasmic reticulum. We have the smooth endoplasmic reticulum down here, and the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Now the first main difference you'll notice, obviously, is the texture. Rough endoplasmic reticulum is rough, smooth endoplasmic reticulum is smooth. Rough endoplasmic reticulum is rough, or RER. The rough ER is rough because it contains ribosomes. And that's because the rough endoplasmic reticulum is responsible for creating proteins, and it needs ribosomes to do that, hence the ribosomes are embedded throughout the endoplasmic reticulum. The smooth endoplasmic reticulum, on the other hand, is not responsible for creating proteins. It's responsible for the synthesis of lipids and hormones, and consequently does not need to have ribosomes embedded into it. Moving on, beyond that, we're talking about chloroplasts. Now, chloroplasts are only found in plants. We can see there's a plant cell here. You've labelled in your plant cells before. And chloroplasts are responsible for turning simple compounds like water and carbon dioxide into energy. And that's because, well, energy like glucose. And that's because plants, they don't eat like humans and animals. So they need to create their own energy, and they do that through photosynthesis, which takes place in the chloroplasts. Lastly, we're going to look at the nucleus, and this is the most important one we're talking about at the moment, because the topic we're actually studying in this first week is DNA and proteins. Now, DNA and proteins, we're talking about DNA. And DNA is found inside the nucleus. Again, it's found in most plant and animal cells. In fact, it's found in almost all eukaryotic cells. There are some exceptions. So, for example, red blood cells in humans don't actually have a nucleus. Now, the purpose of the nucleus is that all the genetic information, DNA, is stored inside the nucleus in the cell. That's important because it's preventing the DNA from damage and it's creating like a safe where we can lock up the DNA and ensure that it's safe, and all the instructions for how the cell is going to operate will remain safe. That's it for the first week in Year 10 Biology. Like I said, it's very simple. Most of it was probably revision. If there's any questions, feel free to ask me in class. Look forward to seeing you there.